Hi patrons, I have a new video for you today. I'm hoping that it'll be helpful, and my apologies that this month has been just so sideways. It has been a challenge for sure. Anyway, I've just had a new admin assistant start and she's been fabulous. And part of what I think is going to be helpful, at least in terms of these videos, is that she's coming at this oxalate thing with a fresh set of eyes. And so she had some really great questions for me recently, and I'm actually going to deal with those questions as part of our video today. Let me start with a really straightforward question that I'm sure a lot of you have, which is, do oxalates have some hereditary component? And what I'd say is yes, they likely do. And the genetics that would affect how well we do or don't process oxalate, that kind of study is just in its infancy. And when I say process oxalate, I really mean how liberally we absorb it and then how readily we excrete it. Those things would be really essential for anybody whose oxalate problem is really coming from their diet as opposed to coming from a genetic issue like primary hyperoxaluria where your body's making it metabolically. That's a whole different ballgame. But for most of us, where really what we've dealt with is oxalate accumulating slowly, and because of our diet, then the genetics there is going to be, I think, a longer haul to see what's associated. And I very much suspect that while we may be dealing with genetics where we either absorb or traffic it, if you will, into tissues and cells more readily, I think the biggest thing going wrong now for most of us who have secondary hyperoxaluria as opposed to primary hyperoxaluria is that our diets have just gone too high. But of course, it does look a little bit like genetics when either mom or dad has a problem and child has problem, or child has problem and mom and dad discover their problem, which was my case. My daughter, my young daughter, as many of you know, was diagnosed long before I was. So the thing is that families don't just share genetics, they share meals. And if you're growing up in a household where people are eating high oxalate food, then you too are going to be eating high oxalate food. More likely that it accumulates more quickly if you're starting out right from the beginning with high oxalate than, perhaps somebody like me who, while my young years there was a high enough oxalate diet going on, it wasn't as bad as it got later when I was trying to eat extra healthy. Okay, so having talked about genetics, let's talk a little bit about the fun of trying to find some of the ingredients in these recipes, because I totally get that sometimes I'm using things that you folks are thinking, what the heck has she got me looking for? Not only do we have the issue that I'm actually using kind of exotic ingredients to start out with, things like extracts that you might normally buy in a health food store, in a pill bottle, versus spices and things like holy llama drops, which we've all had some fun off and on trying to get. Just by way of an aside, Holy Llama is opening up their ordering from the UK to everybody in the world again. So even though we have local distributors, those distributors may not carry everything. So I think this is a good news story that we'll be able to get at those Holy Llama spice drops directly from the UK. I've ordered from them. While I did have the hassle of having some duties to pay as they came into Canada, they're so good, and I'm out of some of the ones I can't find in Canada, so I will be ordering from the UK again in the next couple of weeks. So one of the things that my admin asked me about is, where do I find coconut flour? And honestly, I've been using coconut flour for such a long time, and well before low oxalate, that it never occurred to me that people wouldn't know where to find it. Let me just say, for anybody who's new, coconut flour is likely going to be in a health food store, maybe a bulk food store, and possibly what they call here in North America a natural food section of the store. It's not necessarily out on your regular shelves, but that doesn't mean that you can't find it. And I often buy bulk and online. And the last interesting question that my admin assistant had was about the oxalate and our thyroids. And so I just want to speak briefly to this because I know I've talked about it before. But the thing about the thyroid is new research that I reviewed in the last couple of years shows that oxalate is actually building in the thyroid over time. When researchers took thyroids from newly deceased people, not screening for thyroid disease, but just a thyroid in a person who was allowing their body to be used for scientific purposes. So having said that, they got thyroids from bodies of all different ages, and what they quickly discovered was that if you looked at someone's thyroid and you looked for oxalate accumulation, you could essentially tell how old that person had become by the amount of oxalate in their thyroid. Now that's a pretty astonishing thing if oxalate's not affecting us as long as our kidneys are okay. Because there was nothing about these particular thyroid glands where researchers had looked for like kidney disease or anything. They were just looking at thyroids. And so I really want everyone to keep in mind that oxalate can be doing many things all at the same time. And that a subtle effect on our thyroid, and even if our thyroid hormone is in the quote unquote normal range, but it's low for us, could mean a host of other things. Because as one of our primary glands, the thyroid is actually, if you will, kind of coordinating with the pancreas, with the adrenals. And if the thyroid's low, it can throw these other glands off. And for those of us who are female, a low thyroid can also be affecting our cycle. There's all kinds of things that can be happening, subtle and non-specific, let me say it that way, where a slightly low thyroid, but not low enough perhaps to turn up as a clinical diagnosis, could be enough to throw off a lot of other things. You know, many of us have struggled with energy level. That could be the thyroid, that could be the pancreas, that could be the adrenals, that could be oxalate in our tissues. So a lot of these symptoms won't necessarily look extremely specific until we're really sick. And then it may be more clear to us what's impacting that particular function. I've kind of started to talk about this as our bodies being able to send a clear signal. When there's a lot of oxalate still going into the body, and or where we are newly lowering our oxalate, and so there's a lot of oxalate coming out of the body, the bloodstream can have a lot in there. And if that's what's happening, our bodies may not be able to send really clear signals. But I can certainly tell you that as somebody who now eats really low oxalate, like I eat some plants, but I've gone, I guess I'd call it carnivore adjacent. So, you know, my oxalate intake in a day could be 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. It's certainly not more than that. And if I have any amount of oxalate, it's astonishing how I can suddenly feel like waves of cold that I used to have before because my thyroid wasn't functioning well. Now, having said that, one of the best things we can do in order to handle the thyroid well is get more magnesium. And I love this guy because I can spritz it out on my hand. I can put a little bit on my throat. And that's as close to specific site delivery as you can get. So if I've got more magnesium here on my skin over my thyroid, then that gives the thyroid gland first kick at the can because it goes in through the skin, and the next things are the organs and the structures. So if you do have energy compromise to one degree or another, and it could be multifactorial, it could be coming from more than just one part of the metabolism being under stress. But for those of you who haven't thought about something like this, magnesium oil, I absolutely recommend it. Simple, effective, and frankly, if you've got locations where you have pain or inflammation or old injury sites, you can put this there. I always go for the shoulder because I have an old karate injury, and so I put it here. if that injury gets bothering me. Sore muscles, obviously we know about Epsom salts as well. Use that. That's another way to get magnesium diffusing from the outside of the body in. So usually when you take a supplement, it's going in, it's going down into the digestive tract, and then you have what I call the big bang dose, which is the capsule dissolves, and all of a sudden we have all this available nutrient. So sometimes our digestive tract doesn't deal very well with that, and sometimes it may even have delimiters of one kind or another so that we don't get all of it in. When a nutrient diffuses in slowly through the skin, the thing I like about that is that you do get these tissues that are on the outer edges of the body getting first kick at the can. They get the first crack at that nutrient. And you can deliver it locally, and that can be really helpful. So consider that, and we'll talk again. I hope everyone's having a great day.